Before we get started, I feel the need to make a quick note about Disney. The Disney company, through smaller subsidiary organizations, funded the election and re-election campaigns of several members of the Florida legislature who have gone on to craft the infamous Don't Say Gay bill. While Disney did eventually apologize for their part in helping this come about, have pledged to reassess their giving practices, and there's now even been reporting that behind the scenes the company was trying to dissuade legislators from passing the bill, I still feel the need to point this out, and it was all going on while Disney has been continuing to push to market harder and harder to LGBTQIA plus individuals and to present themselves as a corporation friendly to such people. While statements from the company are leaning in the right direction, I am waiting to see more concrete action from them before I stop putting this marker in front of things. You can see a link down in the description for my full videos on the topic. Well, I guess we have our first proper trailer for Ms. Marvel, so let's not beat around the bush. Let's take a look at it, shall we? I'm liking sort of the, like,
okay, so
drawn in notebook stuff.
I just want to say, I get it.
You get what?
High school.
Kamala.
Another adventure shirt. Cute.
She thinks I'm some kind of weirdo.
You are weirdo.
Boys. Excuse me?
Yeah.
You're kind of on my shirt.
Sorry.
Huh.
But you're staring out the window in your little fantasy land.
It's almost kind of Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Already? Really? Come on, like...
Do I have to figure out my whole future before lunch, or is it like...
But like taking influence from comic books instead of
Maybe
video
you're
games.
right. I spend too much time in fantasy land.
That is not you.
It's not really the brown girls from Jersey City who save the world.
Aww. We'll
That's
see about that.
fantasy, too.
Did something happen to you?
No, why? Did you hear something?
Kamala?
I'll be real curious to see how they handle her origins.
Cosmic. I always thought I wanted this kind of life, but I never imagined any of this.
You may have guessed I like this song.
You are.
I'm a superhero.
They've definitely modded her powers. I love that they're hinting at her final look. Like, we got clearer images of her and something very directly derived from Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel. But I like that at the very end they're hinting at her final look that is much more her own thing. First of all, yeah, I'll just copy it. I like that song a lot. So that gives me good vibes overall. Like, seriously, picking the right music for a trailer can really, really make a huge difference. And it just pulls you in. And I've, like, for me at least, that was a good pick. And like some nice little variants from how the song usually goes. So yeah, so I mentioned I'll be very curious to see how they handle her origins, because they're already messing with definitely the way her powers manifest. God, short version. So in the comics, her origin was tied to this much bigger event that had to do with the Inhumans. Long story as short as I can feasibly make it. So this was around the time when Ike Perlmutter was in charge of a lot more of the creative decisions. He wanted to minimize the X-Men and mutants in general because Fox had the movie rights to those, Marvel didn't. And Marvel was, starting to work much more on its own movie stuff. So there was a minimization of mutants and the X-Men in specific in the comics. And one of the ways that they had to work around that, because one of the advantages of mutants is it gives you an ability to have a ton of characters that you don't have to come up with origin stories for. It's just, they're a mutant, this is their power. Cool, no further explanation needed. But if you're minimizing mutants as much as possible, then you don't have that tool. So what they decided to do was tap the Inhumans. So the Inhumans, it's a big complicated thing, but basically they have these innate abilities that are dormant until activated by something called Terrigen Mist. And so they did a storyline where there was a Terrigen bomb set off basically across the entire planet, where a whole bunch of humans who did not realize they had latent inhuman abilities because of like just a trait that got passed down through their DNA. Some people like not even being an active, like it's like having a kid with different hair color, you know, from the straight line. Sometimes like, oh, that was dormant and now it's there. And so a whole mess of the population suddenly got new powers they didn't know how to deal with, Kamala Khan being one of them. So she got her abilities in an event that they're definitely not going to be doing. They show her clipping on some wrist things, so it makes me wonder if they're going to go artifact-based for her powers, which that has me a little bit, because if that's true, I won't dwell on this too much, but if that is true and that's what they do, I'm a little bit worried about that, because I think the idea of having her abilities be something that she can't just stop having voluntarily, like she could always theoretically stop using them the way she's using them, but part of the thing with Kamala Khan in the comics is she can't just stop having these powers. They're a part of her. And sort of making them something that she could feasibly remove, that, I don't know, that feels like it throws the balance off just a little bit. I don't know, it depends on how they do it, or if that's even what's going on. They've definitely messed with the way her powers manifest. So in the comics, she has stretchy powers. Not quite to the degree of someone like Mr. Fantastic, but kind of in the same ballpark. She can kind of embiggen stretch parts of herself. She can make her fist really big, the embiggen bash, boom. So that's kind of her thing. And here they seem to be manifesting it instead as an energy projection. So like the fist will get big and hit, but it's not her fist getting big. It's like an energy mass that she's controlling, which if you're not going to do the stretching, and like, to be fair, trying to do the stretching, especially on a streaming service budget as opposed to a movie budget, is going to be really difficult, because doing stretching effects, especially on humans and realistic fabrics, even now, that's real hard, because the unnatural stretching of human skin and things of that nature is the kind of thing that really stresses the limits of what CGI can convincingly do well, especially, as I said, if you're not on a blockbuster movie budget, but instead on a streaming service budget. So that move, I would bet more than anything, is probably determined by the budget and the constraints of the format that they're working in. Accepting that was probably a call they were going to have to make, yeah, that's a workable solution. Obviously, we've got some emphasis on her, being a bit of a fangirl for superheroes, which, like, I'll just be happy to see that. I think it's an area that, in general, the MCU hasn't really delved into much. The idea of how people who don't have direct, intimate contact with these superheroes sort of feel about them. We've obviously seen some people think that they're bad, like the Flag Smashers or Zemo and whatnot. But taking on more of the fangirl side of things, that's a nice way to do it. We got that a little bit with Kate Bishop, but that was super specific to Hawkeye. Now, granted, Kamala Khan does latch on to Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers in specific, but in general, her thing in the comics is she just thinks superheroes are really cool, broadly as a general thing. So, and sort of giving it that more direct, fan thing of drawing an OC or yourself in this costume. And as I said, visually, there's sort of a little bit of an element of something like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, but whereas that was pulling its influences from video games, this is pulling them from comics in terms of little speech bubbles or other little things. I do wonder how much of that is actually going to be in there, how much is just for the trailer, especially early on in the trailer where they had it just the speech bubbles flat out appeared. I'm like, unless that's part of a transition from a her homemade comic panel to the real world thing, I don't see that actually happening in there. But I will be really curious to see to what degree that visual language is implemented in this. I'm hoping a decent amount, because it's another way to make this not just a more or less standard young superhero story. It's a way to give it a more visual punch. And that's not to say that Kamala Khan is devoid of things that make her interesting. Her family and her cultural background is very different from the vast majority of comic book heroes, either ones in the comic books themselves or ones that have been adapted, certainly. So there's still plenty of ways to make her unique, but I think giving it that extra visual flair is not only just a nice touch in general, especially if they can pull it off, but it fits. It suits her. So the things I'm seeing, I'm liking. And the casting seems solid so far. We don't, it's hard to get much more than a vibe off of the performances from trailers of this length, but the vibe so far, yeah, I'm looking forward to this. When do we get like a full proper trailer for She-Hulk? But in any case, this is solid. This is solid. I'm excited for this. What do you think about it? What do you think about this trailer? What do you think about the character in general? Whatever your thoughts are. I talked really fast this time. I don't know. I swear I didn't have like extra coffee or anything this morning. But whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe, Patreon. That is how I pay the bills. If you're not able to support me that way, all the other stuff that I mentioned does help me out. Plus, there's links to other things I do down in the description. I'm continuing to talk this fast. I don't know why, but don't worry about it too much. Despite the speed at which I'm speaking, I do try and take a relaxed attitude around here. So you can just come on back next time you need a break. It's the end credits. Means I gotta shout out some patrons. This month, it is Turok, Oliver B., Linda Walters, TT, Robin Powell, Frenobilax, The Poodle, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Dharma, Michael Doyle, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Casperl, Adam Lefty Taylor, Robin Moore, Shayla Gorley, and Bookworm. Thanks so much for your support.